still here. Can you see us all?
Okay, everyone, welcome to the Carry On Collective. We are here today with the Bay Area Pug Project, and we've got Kim and Elizabeth from the nonprofit. So they're here to tell us all about the Bay Area Pug Project. And I'm excited to hear all about this. My pug is at my feet right now. I rescued him 2 years ago from another nonprofit. So tell me about the Pug Project and why you started it, and really specifically about backyard breeding and how bad it is.
Yeah. So Elizabeth and I and two others split off from another current rescue in California. And a large part of that was the overwhelming need. And so we saw the fact that here in Northern California, there was literally only one pug rescue remaining that was just getting overwhelmed. Another one had pretty much shut down. Southern California has like 4 or 5, and up here, where we have just as much population and just as many breeders, we didn't have the resources. So a group of us that live up here kind of in the North Bay area split apart from the other rescue to form Bay Area Pug Project. And we specifically named it Pug Project because we want to be about education as well. We're not strictly a rescue. Our goal is to really talk about the backyard breeding, about the breed, about their needs. So in February, we filed all of our paperwork, and anyone opening a nonprofit knows that that's a little overwhelming. Of course, we also started it as everyone was being laid off at the IRS and in the federal government. So, we were kind of praying that everything would go through. So we got our 501c status in mid-March, and literally, I think it was that day that we got a call from a local shelter that they had 4 different pugs that needed rescuing. So we hit the ground running way harder than we initially thought. Luckily, we had, like we said, a very strong team behind us. With all of us have, if not years and years of fostering experience and rescue experience, nonprofit experience. So we all came to it with skill sets that enabled us to kind of jump on the ground running. And I think that was definitely what we needed to happen. We all think we're going to start a slow start, like taking a dog here and there, we'll kind of get our feet wet. We'll see how it's going. And in our first week, we had a dog with a massive tumor. We took in a couple other dogs. We were racing off to the emergency vets. It's typical rescue life where nothing goes as smoothly as you think it's going to go. But I think it also, it reminded us all like the need was there and the need is massive. And, we needed to be up here in this area. And I'll let Elizabeth talk a little bit about it too. Like her experience that in the beginning was just as crazy.
Where are you located exactly?
Yeah, so our official mailing address is here in Vacaville, California. Our fosters are from Sacramento out through Lodi, all over into the East Bay. Our goal is really to cover the Northern California kind of Central Valley up. We're working with shelters down. We've pulled dogs down in Manteca. We've pulled dogs down near Los Banos. But really our goal is to stay kind of here in the Northern California section.
Okay. And Elizabeth, why don't you tell me a little bit about why is it pugs specifically that you are rescuing?
Sure. So our main priority is pugs, and then we do take in pug mixes, and then the occasional Frenchie because shelters are overrun with the brachiocephalic breed, and the Frenchie rescues are totally full as well. And so if we have the space, we will take in female Frenchies sometimes.
Okay. And how many do you have right now so far?
We have one Frenchie in that's available right now.
How many dogs total?
Yeah, so since we opened, we've taken in 21 dogs. We've adopted out 10 already, and that's Thursday will be week 7. So, like I said, we hit the ground running.
And we've got a handful that are available to adopt right now, maybe like 3 or 4. And then the rest are in the foster homes waiting for their spay or neuter, or we're still evaluating them. Some of them are getting eye removals, which is more common in pugs than people expect, especially with their bulging anatomy with their eyes. But we're working with our local vets and other groups in order to take care of those and get them ready for adoption.
Okay, so tell me about backyard breeding, because I know this is a huge problem across the country, and we see the explosion, especially of, well, Frenchies. I see. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think California has a huge issue with it. I think many counties are now trying to start tackling it, but it became such an overwhelming problem. And it's not something that's in your face, right? It's not something that's easy to track. These are people breeding at home, often breeding dogs that are siblings or related. So we're inbreeding genetic issues over and over into this breed that already had their own, pitfalls. Like, Elizabeth said, we have the bulgy eyes, so they're much more prone to eye issues. The breathing issues where they have narrowed nostrils, they have, inverted saccules, they have small airways. We're seeing a lot of Frenchies now that have prolapses. So whether they're, vaginal prolapse, rectal prolapse, where their musculature overall is just suffering from this overbreeding. And many of these females, we find they're bred and bred and bred, and then they're dumped when they can no longer use them. So that's a big part of why the shelters are overwhelmed. Like, people literally think that they're going to make so much money off this breed. If you ever look at Craigslist for a pug or a Frenchie, it is absolutely overwhelming, the sheer number. And they're like literally posting hourly for these dogs, thinking that they're going to make money off of them, that they're going to have these quick sells. They don't vaccinate the puppies in their care. They don't worm them. They're passing off dogs. We literally took in a dog last year with another rescue, where the person bought it off of Craigslist. The dog came to her with parvo. She wasn't aware of it. They did not have the resources to try and save the dog. We spent, thousands of dollars trying to save the dog, and the puppy passed away from complications. And all that dog could have used to save itself was some vaccines that you could literally even go buy at, your local Tractor Supply store. If you're that desperate to get a vaccine in a dog, there's options out there. So, the people out there, and I mean, I think that as the counties try and crack down, they're looking at the Facebook postings, they're looking at the Craigslist postings. Many counties are starting to fine people if they're finding that they're breeding them. They're confiscating dogs if they have too many or making the owner surrender. But, that's a county by county situation. Many of these counties out in the Central Valley are so under-resourced. They might have one shelter for huge geographical areas that it's easy for these people to hide, right? And unfortunately, the public is still, we're perpetrating this continued circle by buying these dogs off of these sites, getting these dogs that are in no way genetically tested, like we said, are not even vaccinated. You might be bringing in a sick dog into your house. And often people then, don't have the resources, so then they dump the dog at the shelter because they can't afford to take care of it. And it's really, California, I think our proximity to Mexico does not help. A lot of pugs come up out of Mexico where there's, higher rates of distemper, there's higher rates of parvo, so many gastrointestinal parasites that come that, we're bringing in even more things to complicate the situation, and exposing our dogs here that may or may not be getting their vaccines to these things, that it's just making it worse over time. And I think COVID did not help. People were locked up at home. They had their dogs. They're like, we'll breed our dogs. We'll make money. We're not working, blah, blah, blah. And now here we are a few years later, the market's fallen out of the dogs. People have gone back to work. They're surrendering their dogs because they no longer have time for them. But yet the breeders are still out there thinking that they're going to make this, quick turnaround of $700 plus per puppy, and basically have no outflow. They're not, many of these dogs sadly need emergency C-sections when they deliver. They cannot, especially Frenchies, they are big-headed, big-shouldered, and in a smaller breed. They do not deliver well, especially if they have a larger litter. They often get stuck. There's complications. Then they dump the dog at the vet because they can't afford to pay the C-section bill. It's just such a never-ending cycle that I think that rescues get overwhelmed and shelters get overwhelmed as to how do we break the cycle.
Yeah.
There's also, like, we'll see at the shelters, the majority of dogs, I want to say, that we've ever brought in our experience in the last couple of years, is always like a male that's like 1 to 3 years old, um, or a female that's closer to like 2 to 3. Last week or 2 weeks ago, we brought in one, and then the shelter reached out. They're like, actually, we realized they came in with a female, and it turns out they were most likely breeding partners. Both came in with eye issues. And then another problem with going to a backyard breeder, purchasing off of Craigslist, Facebook, um, is, a reputable breeder will take the dog back. If there's ever, medical issues, financial hardship, a reputable breeder will take that dog back, because it's a kind of a guarantee for the rest of its life. They care about the breed, they care about the bloodline. And so I think a lot of people don't want to pay the prices of a reputable breeder, and so they go for cheaper, and then they aren't educated by that breeder or the backyard breeder about what they need to do, the puppy vaccines they need to get, things to watch out for. And in our application for our dogs, we make sure there's like educational questions, like, are you aware that they might have allergies? Are you aware that, down the line they may need like a soft palate surgery? And we also ask, um, not only to make sure people are aware, but to make sure that we're getting the right kind of adopter, to figure out what their budget is for
Hmm.
vet care in the year. And we also break it down on our website, dollar by dollar, of what we put into the dog and what they should expect in the dog's lifetime, especially with pug dentals. I personally just spent $2,500 on my pug's teeth, and she just turned 3 for her first ever dental, because they have the same amount of teeth as a regular dog,
German Shepherd,
a
yeah.
German Shepherd, in literally like an inch worth of mouth. And so the teeth are extremely hard to clean at home, um, because they're all sideways and they're kind of sprinkled throughout the mouth rather than, in a typical dental line. And then sometimes they never erupted from the gum, which was one of my dog's cases. And so they had to like dig in and remove that. And so there's a lot of not hidden things, but that are breed specific veterinary requirements that I think a lot of people aren't aware of.
Yeah.
Um, and then on top of all of that, the vet costs in California have skyrocketed. Um, and a lot of people didn't predict that. And a lot of veterinary businesses are being taken over by bigger companies that are then affecting their prices. So a lot of them are no longer like
Yeah.
locally owned, determining their prices. It's kind of more corporations. And so that's kind of all factoring into people thinking this might be a more affordable breed. And when it comes time to like take care of something that maybe they weren't aware of about the breed needing things, the prices are out of this world for a lot of cases.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Okay, tell me about adoption process. So, what kind of parents or families are you looking for specifically for the pug breeds? And how can somebody begin the adoption process if they're looking to rescue?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of our mission is the education, right? So we talk a lot on our website about the process, about what to expect with the breed. Most people, I will say, that adopt pugs, there's two options. One, they've either always wanted a pug their entire life and never had the opportunity, and they're finally financially ready now. Or two, they've been people that have had pugs their entire childhood and grown up with pugs, and they are fixated on the breed. And those are the ones we love because they have realistic expectations of the dogs. I think that, the media frenzy around pugs is it's this lazy couch potato that just lays curled up next to your side. They're kind of fat, they don't do a lot. Well, the reality is, a puppy is a puppy, right? They run around, they chew things, they bite, they make messes. They're no different. And realistically, we want our pugs lean. We want them trim. We want them active. That fat, lazy pug on the couch is going to have health issues beyond,
Yes.
what any other dog should have. So we do a lot of education. We have an online website where you go in, you fill out quite a long application because we want to know a lot about you. your family, what your expectations are of a dog, your other dogs, were they vaccinated or spayed? We do not adopt out to homes where your other dogs are not vaccinated or unfixed. That's pretty much a rescue kind of rule. We're not going to perpetrate any kind of breeding situation. So the minute you say your dogs aren't fixed in your home, we're not going to adopt you. All of our dogs that are over, basically 7 to 8 months, depending on the puppy and their weight, are fixed before we can adopt out. That's like California regulations for rescues and shelters. So, we're not the type of place where you can come thinking that you're going to get a dog and, mate it with your pug, a year from now or whatever. So we really look closely at that. We look at your lifestyle. How often are you home? Do you work 12 hours a day and the pug's going to be home alone? That's not great. Pugs are very, very people oriented. They want to be your shadow. Like you said, your pug's under your feet. They are not dogs that do well mentally or physically when they're left alone. So, can somebody be home with them part of the day? What are your hours? Do you have dog walkers? Can they go to doggy daycare so they get that exercise and stimulation? We look at all of that, on top of the financials, like Elizabeth said, like, can you afford vet insurance? Can you afford, if something happens to your pug? Even just, I literally just took my pug in for his routine vaccinations, and you walk out $400 later kind of situation. There's no such thing as cheap, easy vet care anymore. There's such a massive, I think, I think there's like 8 vet schools in the entire United States or some ridiculous thing. So, as so many people have retired off, there's not that ability to, put more people into these roles. Like Elizabeth said, these companies are being sold off to big corporations that run them very, very differently than, the local guy that lived in his community that liked to help out his neighbors. That just does not happen the same anymore. So, we look at all of that. We do video interviews. We want to see your home, your yard, your gate. Is it secure? You'd be surprised what people walk you around their house and you're like, there's 5 pill bottles on that kitchen table and your chairs are pulled out. Like, you look at those things. And we really talk through, what to expect. The first 3 days, how's your dog going to act? In 3 weeks, in 3 months, we go over that whole aspect of settling in a new dog. And many of our dogs come out of shelters. They may have resource guarding with their food, like, feeding them separately, picking bowls up. If your dog has something that they're super, super attached to, putting that away as you bring in a new dog and slowly reintroducing things. So a lot of our mission is really around the education of the breed, bringing in a new rescue dog. And then, like everybody, like if this doesn't work out, like we take that dog back. We do not want our dog or the family in an uncomfortable situation where anybody's at risk or not, emotionally prepared to be able to deal with this. And it happens. Sometimes you think you have the best fit. That dog goes into the home for whatever reason. The dog is not the best fit for that family. And then, we bring the dog back. We work with the family to find the right personality or the right, maybe they thought they needed a puppy and maybe, a 5 or 6-year-old settled dog would have been way more better for their lifestyle. So looking at all of that aspect of it.
I
We
love that.
also, oh,
That's
sorry, I
so
wanted to add a
important.
couple more things. With regards to the education and looking at the home, there's other things like pools, especially in California. We have guidelines and requirements around having a pool in your backyard because pugs can't swim. Like, no, they're not natural swimmers. Um, and like stuff like that, or if people say that the dog stays outside, like when they leave the house, or if they say that most of their dogs just like kind of stay outside and they come in to sleep, especially if they live in Northern California with all of the different microclimates we have here. It's different microclimate by microclimate, and we also have to educate, like, again, pugs want to be around their person
Yeah.
most of the time. We can't let them stay outside unsupervised for the majority of the time, but especially just with the weather, because they can't handle extreme temperatures either way. And it kind of, to reiterate with Kim, when Kim was saying like the stereotype of the breed, people just expect them to be super lazy. And I'm sure in your experience as well, it's not usually the case.
No.
We've had people come back being like, this isn't a pug. Like, this is absolutely not a pug. They're active. And it's like, we have to say, like, pugs can be as active as you want them to be. Like mine, I've accidentally trained an Olympic athlete who needs
Yes.
to go to the dog park multiple hours a day to
Oh,
run the fence with the big dogs. And she's super lean, but that also eliminates so many health issues that she could experience later on. And yes, she can be a couch potato maybe in her later years. And then I would adjust her food intake, her caloric intake. It's all about the education of like, yeah, depending on if they got a lot going on that day, talking about food. We also want to set people up with the good expectations when they adopt, saying like, hey, it's a quarter cup, it's a half a cup
yeah.
max
Yeah.
twice a day.
Yeah.
We're not
Do
doing
not follow what is on the dog food bag by
no,
any means. It does not
we're not
work.
doing lunch. Or they're like, pug faces are like built to beg. That's just what they look like. They're
Yes.
always, they can just look at you and they're like, you're like, but they're sad and they're hungry. No, they just look that way. You don't need to give them a treat. And if
Yeah.
you do, give them a carrot, give them
Yeah.
a green bean.
Yep.
So that's kind of like with our adoption process, it, we've got basic guidelines. We're looking to see like, do you really want a pug? Are
Yeah.
you are you prepared for them to want to sleep in your bed, touching you at all times?
Yeah.
Because if you're like, no, they're going to sleep in a different room in a cage. If you work on it with them, maybe. Because,
Yeah.
but understand, like, majority of them are not going to be happy crated unless you work on it with them. And
Yeah.
some people have been like, well, I don't want a dog that's following me to the bathroom and following me into the shower
Don't get
and
a pug.
following. Then
Don't get a
don't get a
pug.
pug.
They are
Yeah.
called a Velcro dog for
Yeah.
a reason.
So
Yeah.
it's so funny. The first time we ever walked our rescue pug, we ran into our neighbors and she said, "Oh, Velcro pug." And I was like, "What is a Velcro pug?" And then sure enough, we found out very quickly what a Velcro pug is. But
Yeah.
yeah, I will say they are not in any way true to the depiction that the television shows.
Yeah.
Our guy is our vet makes fun of him, calls him the diva every time we bring him in. He fetches better than our Boston Terrier. He is full of energy. But he's the sweetest little thing. And yes, he drives me crazy when he follows me into the bathroom, but that's okay. Um, Talk to me a little bit about how to surrender an animal and what I mean, I know there's plenty of people that don't feel bad about it and unfortunately just leave them on the side of the road. How can we encourage those people and then the other people who may be struggling to actually surrender the dog rather than leaving it for death, basically?
Yeah. I mean, I think, first of all, if you're going to surrender a dog, there's tons of rescues out there. There's
Mm-hmm.
breed specific, but there's so many rescues that take in everything as well. So you may need to apply to a couple rescues. 90% of us are foster home based. So if we do not have an open foster home, we can't take in a dog. We're not like a shelter. We don't have a facility. We can't go, 100% over capacity by sticking dogs in everywhere. We are all volunteers, right? We are bringing these dogs into our own homes with our own families, with our own pets. So we have limitations. We can't just say, oh, 5 dogs applied today. We're going to take them all, stuff them in a corner, whatever. So, you may need to apply to a few different places. And I think, the biggest thing is we all have applications. So when you apply to surrender, be realistic. I cannot tell you how many times we've taken in a dog. Literally, we just took in one not that long ago that they never told us the dog had seizures. Well, the dog has epilepsy. So needless to say, the foster home that the dog went to was not the perfect foster home for that fit. And if we'd known about that, we could have gotten the dog right into our vet. We could have done so many other things for the dog right off the bat if we had only known. Just because a dog has a medical issue or maybe has, I can't tell you how many times, well, the dog's not fully potty trained. Well, that's okay. We can work with those things.
Mm-hmm.
What we can't take in is dogs that are vicious. So a dog that has a bite history, we cannot put our families and our fosters at risk for that. But 90% of the time, yes, you're going to find a rescue able to take that dog. Do not wait till the last minute. You may need to wait until a foster home opens up. So, if you're thinking you're getting to that position, whether it's financially, emotionally, many times we have older couples where, one partner passes away or they have to go into assisted living, can no longer take the dog. Start applying when you think that that could even happen. You can always back out. You're in no way required to do this, but, start reaching out, start looking, start talking to people, talk to your local shelter. Often they have resources. If you Google online, there's tons of different places out there that will take a dog. But you do need to be patient about it, and you need to be honest so that we can make the best fit for your dog. Because we in no way want, to put that dog's health at risk. We don't want to put our own foster's dog's health at risk. So the more we know, the better. Often we get told, and I can't say how many times I hear this the last few years, well, we had a baby, so we no longer have time for our dog. And that one, I will say, is the one that bothers me the most because, we've had people that the dog's 12 years old. You've had this dog its entire life, and now you have a baby and you think you cannot keep your dog.
Yeah.
So, you may need to look at different resources. Maybe you need a dog walker to help you for a little while. Maybe there's a local teen in your community that can get your dog out for you, while that baby's still new and you're not getting any sleep. Look at different options because that dog, you're their entire life. Like that, you are their being. Yes, they adjust. Yes, they go to new homes. Yes, they become happy, but it's definitely a traumatic period for them. So if you can, even, figure out a way like, oh my gosh, maybe we need help for a couple weeks. There's also organizations out there that do temporary foster homes to help you get back on your feet. There's places where you can, if you're getting homeless and you're going to have to go into a shelter for a while, that can help place your dog temporarily. Ask for help, ask for resources, talk to your county, talk to your shelters. There's so many options out there. But yeah, you have to look and you have to do a little bit of legwork to make it happen.
And it's completely free to surrender as well. I know we've got lots of questions about like, how much does it cost? Is it like, and it's also not anonymous, just putting that out there. Like you will have to put down your name. We ask for medical records and photos as well. And then another thing is we also want to clear up is if for some reason a local rescue cannot take the dog, we recommend going to the shelter because so many rescues are partnered with shelters. We get notified like, hey, we brought in a pug today. Or like, hey, we're like, can you pick them up next week? So you research your local shelters. But if that is the case, you can surrender to a shelter. And because it's a pug, like very breed specific, there are groups throughout the state that will pull from the shelters as soon as they see that breed in the shelter. So don't be too worried that it would be like on a euthanasia list, because we're all watching, and there's a lot of rescues that have their eye out for this breed in the shelter.
So since March, you said you've had about 20 rescues already.
21, yeah.
Is there a typical time of year when there's an increase in surrenders?
Definitely. I will tell you the end of the year before the holidays and as people start summer vacations.
Okay.
Those are the most common times where people decide that they need to surrender their dogs, whether it's, they're going to be traveling, they're moving. It just seems to kind of hit those two certain times. It also probably ties in a little bit to, dogs' heat cycles. When do dogs go in heat? When do you have more puppies coming up? Those kind of things all play into it. For the most part, I would say summer is really, really the worst. And a lot of it is the fact that people want to travel. Doggy daycare is expensive. Boarding's expensive. They can't find anyone to take their dog. And for whatever reason, they think surrendering is the option. But yeah, and that's part of the reason we really want to educate people on looking at your resources.
Definitely.
And we also I've seen, it's not as crazy as it is before the holidays, but right after the holidays, if people were gifted a puppy, never gift.
Please never gift
Never
anyone an
gift a
animal.
puppy. Unless it is like, planned for your house and they've always wanted one. You're like, okay, we're finally ready. Here's the puppy you've always wanted. But never gift a puppy to someone who wasn't actively looking for one.
Okay. Okay. Where can people find you if they're interested in adopting or surrendering?
Elizabeth, it's your
Oh, sure.
website.
bayareapugproject.org, or on Facebook or Instagram is just Bay Area Pug Project.
Awesome.
And we are super responsive to any way. You can contact us via the website, or you can text the number on our social or website, and we'll respond right away.
And you can see the available dogs right now too on the website.
Right. And also a part of our adoption process too is once you become an approved adopter, we can start talking to you about dogs that aren't posted yet and be like, hey, actually, they're getting spayed next week. They kind of match what you're looking for. Do you want to go ahead and meet them before that and claim them? And so that we never even post them to the site.
I love
So
that.
we always recommend getting pre-approved if you're like, I want to adopt, this year, or, maybe not in the next month or two, but I want to be ready. We always recommend just getting your interview done, getting your home check done, so that when that dog comes in, you kind of you're not like first in line, but you are ahead of line of people who then apply and may not already be approved.
Okay. That's great information. Okay. Any final thoughts that you want to share on the Bay Area Pug Project?
Wow. I mean, I think, like with any rescue, there's ups and downs. I think, but we are dependent upon volunteers. So I think, if people are out there thinking, even if you have a spare hour a week where you could drive a dog to a vet appointment or, volunteer at one of our events for any of the rescues, we need volunteers. We need foster homes. We need drivers. We need people at events. If you have, maybe you're super skilled at social media, or maybe you can spend 30 minutes sitting down at a computer a day and doing some data input. Like, reach out to your local rescues, reach out to your local shelters. Everybody needs help. And it doesn't mean that you need to commit like your whole life to them. Like, even little bits of time help immensely when we're trying to do this work,
Yeah.
and it's
Absolutely.
so incredibly gratifying.
Yeah.
And I will also say that it's important to, like, one thing we always want to explain to people is that rescue pricing is going to be different than you expect unless you've rescued before. It's not going to be like going to the shelter and spending $75, or having it, when someone sponsors the dog and it's free that day. The costs are barely covering what we put into the dog. We are not funded by the local government. Or by large grants. We're a brand new rescue, but I would say the majority of rescues aren't. So the prices are not going to be what you expect. But we do price them based on age and based on breed within the rescue. So just take a look at each rescue. We're super transparent about like what we spend and what we charge for each dog on our website. But just keep in mind when you're taking a look at adopting, we also have got a disclaimer on our website, like, yes, some people are always going to go to a breeder, and that's fine. We always recommend an ethical one, and a professional one, but keep in mind that they're not going to come spayed or neutered, or you're going to have to take care of a lot of those vaccines. And then one other thing is we do reimburse a portion of the adoption fee for people who get puppies and who get them neutered or spayed when they're old enough. So that's, to talk a bit transparently about pricing, something to take into consideration when looking to adopt from a rescue.
Yeah. That's great information because I know it is really expensive and it can add up, but if they're already vaccinated and they're spayed, it makes a huge difference. And it takes one more thing off of your plate, especially when you're going through the rescue process.
And
So
really, I mean, our goal is to get that dog ready so that first year, your vet bills are minimal, right?
yeah.
Maybe we're doing a dental on an older dog. Maybe, the dog has a medical condition that we're treating and getting you all the prescriptions ready for. Really, our goal is to get that dog as healthy. And, all rescues, you're going to get every medical record we have. There should be no surprises about the dog that you're taking in. Versus, if you're going to a shelter, the dog may have been there for a few days, they may have a behavior assessment, maybe they got spayed or neutered in their basic vaccines, but we're really getting to know these dogs before we adopt them out. We know their personalities, what they're working on, we have all their medical that you get fully. So like Elizabeth said, we're spending the same on vet costs that you are. So our goal is really to help decrease the amount of cost you're going to have that first year. And yes, you're going to pay us, but we're hoping that that's less than you would pay, if you go to get that spay or neuter on your own. And this way we're making sure it's done.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Kim and Elizabeth, thank you so much for sharing the Bay Area Pug Project. We will make sure to plug your Instagram, your Facebook, and your website. And if you are interested in adopting or you need to surrender your pup, please check them out. Get some more information. The website is full of really good educational materials. So thank you so much for being on with us today. We appreciate you. And we are so happy that you started this project in the Bay Area because I know it's desperately needed. So thank
Thank
you.
you so
Thank
much for
you.
having us.